This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to this week's episode of the DocNJock Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Adam the Jock Straczynski. On today's show, boy, we've got an absolute ton for you. Rhodes is back at the Performance Center. We're going to explain what that means and who that is, because it might not be what you think, or maybe it is. Also, there's some new news with AEW and New Japan having a crossover. We're going to get into all of that. We're going to talk about what's going on with NXT UK and what the burgeonings of a new NXT are and what's going to be taking place with that, as well as a ton of heat in AEW. There's a bunch of stuff surrounding CM Punk. We're going to spend a large part of our show discussing that, as well as all of the news that's taking place in WWE. Doing it with me, as always, he's the one, he's the only, he's the Doc, John Macaroon. What's up, cuz?
Lots of drama in the world of wrestling. Some good, some not so good. So I'm excited this week, man. The last 3 weeks, I've really put a charge in my wrestling habits, my wrestling viewing, and I just think the shows have been great with the promos, the in-ring action, the matches, the elevation of a WWE Hall of Famer to a great position. I'm very happy with how wrestling has been the last couple of weeks.
You know, it's weird because we watch so much wrestling, and it's like when we sit down to record this podcast, it feels like Monday took place almost a month ago. So sometimes I'll look back at the rundown, I'll look at our notes, because I update this every day. Like, we'll watch something, and then I'll take notes, and I'll put it in here for the rundown. I look at the notes, because I'm like, man, what do I want to talk about with Monday Night Raw? Because, like I said, it feels like it took place so long ago, because we've been inundated with so much wrestling throughout the course of the week. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I have a note here, and it says, does the WWE product feel more authentic to you? And I was like, where did you want to go with that? And I look kind of underneath it. I felt like with WWE, there is more this era of realism, and I don't know if it's what Triple H is trying to convey to everybody. I don't know if it's his style of booking, but WWE feels much more real than it ever has. It feels like they have stepped. I don't want to say that they've gone away from the superstar, right? But it feels like it's much more grounded. It feels like it has this authenticity to it where you've got guys in the ring, and these guys don't really like each other, and they're going to fight over a championship that means something. And that's kind of what I got. And I think it was really highlighted with the Drew McIntyre-Kevin Owens promo. I thought that really encapsulated what this new version of WWE is going to be, that's going to be held by Triple H. Does WWE feel more authentic, more real to you?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, when you have Kevin Owens reveal that, hey, I haven't put on a strap in 5 years, it's got to change, and then highlighted by Karrion Kross talking about Drew McIntyre and his position and the WWE making the wrong choice, it absolutely has an amazing feel of like, this is what makes professional wrestling really spectacular, is when we harken back to the WCW days where you kind of had that feeling like, wait a minute, is this real? Is this backstage? Just inside? And it makes you feel good that there's a knowledge that we have because we follow wrestling, that there's an awareness that you and I have because we follow it so much that we get some of the stuff that they're talking about. So it's absolutely spectacular. And really, in the end, it's a concerted shift. And that's what we wanted. We didn't want more of the same, because we literally felt, that if Vince McMahon was going to be in charge, he was going to run the same show for the next decade.
Yep. And
it might have got to the point where we said, look, we got to talk a little bit less about WWE and just hit the real main points, because it was boring. It was boring.
That's kind of what happened with our show. We ended up there were segments where where WWE would get like two things, sometimes one thing. And it was just, we ended up dialing it down, because the thing is, I think everybody thinks that we always want to bag on stuff. We always want to talk bad about stuff. We just want to give you our honest assessment of it. If we don't like it, we're going to come here, we're going to tell you about it. If we love it, we're going to spend, I don't know, if you go back and look at the last 3 shows that we've done, I think we've spent maybe 35 or 45 minutes on just WWE product because it's been so much better. So if it's good, we'll absolutely gloss it up. If it's bad, don't be surprised if we take a shit on it because it's just not good.
Right.
And I think you're right. If Vince McMahon was going to be in power, we were going to get the same show over and over and over. And there's a ton of reports that have come out about Vince being in production meetings and basically just going back to the same old things because either he tended to forget that he already did them or he just didn't care. And we don't need that. We don't want that.
And the focus of our show became who was getting buried as opposed to who was getting elevated. And that became a real detriment to the brand.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And like I said, I think a lot of what you're seeing now, and I think of a lot of where this direction, this tone, the tenor of what you're going to get with specifically Monday Night Raw, but also SmackDown, it was encapsulated by the promo by Drew McIntyre and Kevin Owens. I thought this was an absolutely great promo. I thought this was the thing of the night. Normally when I watch a wrestling show, I'm like, what is the one thing that I really took away from this show? What was the thing that was absolutely awesome, or what was the thing that was absolutely horrible? And for me, it was this promo. I thought this promo was so good. You have these two guys, these two guys who are legit fighters, right? Like Drew McIntyre has a great look. If you ever ran across Drew McIntyre in a dark alley and he was in a bad mood, you know he would F you up. Kevin Owens, his whole gimmick is he is a fighter. And Kevin Owens does some crazy stuff. For being as big as Kevin Owens is so agile. It's unreal. Both these guys get in the ring. Both have microphones. Both are cutting promos against each other. And the line, we're wrestlers standing in a wrestling ring, so let's just wrestle. I thought that was absolutely awesome. And it points to this, like you said, a dramatic shift going away from what you got with Vince McMahon to what you're now getting with Triple H. Remember, wrestler, wrestling ring, let's wrestle. Those are all words that Vince said you can't use in your promos. Instead it would be, we're superstars, let's fight right here, right now, in the squared circle, or some crap like that. It would just be different. But going, we're wrestlers in a wrestling ring, so let's just wrestle, I thought was absolutely awesome. What did you make of the promo? And then what did you make of the match afterwards? Because I did have some issues with the match after.
Well, I look at it like it was a feud that kind of is really nice to see in regards to two guys that both could benefit from getting a push, and both who potentially need the opportunity to move up and can afford a loss. So I think that makes for a great storyline. I didn't have a problem with the match. I'm curious to see what your thoughts were with it. I'm kind of just hoping I don't want to be disappointed. I think it's time for a world title reign from Kevin Owens. Now, is the question maybe we'll start to explore over the next few weeks, is he the one that potentially ends the reign of Roman Reigns? Maybe not, but maybe a feud with Cody Rhodes might be down the road, or maybe a potential feud with whoever the next champion is. But I just want to see Kevin Owens get that strap, and it's an opportunity that he needs because he looks like a world champion.
Yeah, he does look like a world champion, and it's been a long time since he's held the belt. So my big issue with the match was I thought they did a really good job. There was a really nice pace. There were points, though, where Drew McIntyre just wasn't selling an injury, just wasn't selling a blow that he took. And I think a lot of this is kind of encapsulated by the end of the match when the Usos end up jumping in. The match is a disqualification, which, look, me and you both don't like disqualifications in matches, but I thought this was a really good way to keep both these guys looking strong. And it helps set up for what's going to take place with Roman Reigns and Drew McIntyre in Cardiff. So you end up having the Usos basically annihilating Drew McIntyre, who ends up popping up and takes out both of the Usos, only to spin around and then get hit by a move from Kevin Owens. And that lays out Drew McIntyre. Everything else that took place didn't lay Drew McIntyre out. Like, they were in a battle with each other.
Yes.
And there was a point where Drew, ends up getting hit by Kevin Owens and just kind of pops back up and goes for a Claymore. And I'm just like, what? How? You need to sell what's going on here. Like, make each other look as strong as possible. And
better selling, yes.
Yeah, and then when you get jumped by the tag team champs, it should mean something. And it really came off as though it didn't mean anything. Again, this is something that WWE does sometimes. And pay close attention, guys. You'll have a singles wrestler get jumped by a tag team. Now, that tag team should be able to inflict two times as much damage on the singles wrestler. But what'll end up happening is the singles wrestler ends up standing tall over the tag team. Like a 2-on-1, that should never happen. It just shouldn't happen unless it's a squash match. That should never happen. Not when it's your champions. When it's your champions, that doesn't happen. He ends up popping up, and like I said, Kevin Owens is the one that lays him out. Now, Kevin Owens makes all of this that much better with an off-mic remark to the Usos where he says, hey, tell your tribal chief that he owes me one. I thought that was absolutely great, and it really did help tie this together, and it really did help put a nice bow on it. I thought the way it ended up finishing was absolutely great. How we got there, I thought, could have used a little bit of work.
Yeah, I agree, but that's definitely interesting to see where that plays out with when and how Kevin Owens is going to get retribution or get his payback. So that's going to be interesting to see. But yeah, you could have probably did without the Usos coming in, but you know they got to also weave in the feud with Roman Reigns and Drew McIntyre. So even though it's a struggle, we got what we got. But I thought it was good to see two guys getting more love. And man, Drew McIntyre also looks like he's also in need of a nice title run too in this day and era. Could you imagine now Triple H backing Drew McIntyre? Oh my God, you could create some real magic and some real memories.
Absolutely. Was there anything else on Raw that really caught your eye or stood out?
Oh man, I've been loving the way they've been using AJ Styles, putting over guys, working with in the ring. I feel like the opportunity for him now to kind of be that bridge as a character that can put over some characters has just been amazing. I'm really liking, obviously, the Usos being on there. I'm liking, kind of sort of coming around to the women a little bit more. I know that, there's opportunities with Bianca Belair and moving forward and the intrigue now with Becky Lynch. So right now it's kind of like a holding pattern with Monday Night Raw to see what's going to be next as these feuds kind of now are established and what the next step is. So this Monday's Raw is going to be very fascinating. I thought Raw was a very good, entertaining show, and I thought that you're getting what I think people are liking is I think the matches are just a little bit longer that allow you to kind of tell the story. But maybe the one critique is sometimes the way in which the commercials are getting laid out. You're kind of cutting away at some times that maybe you don't need to.
Yeah, I do not like the usage of the commercial breaks. It just kind of disrupts the match because you'll be getting sunk into it, and then all of a sudden you're kind of taken out of it because now you got to watch the Snickers commercial. Absolutely.
But other than that, listen, man, Raw's been much more entertaining of a 3-hour watch, much more easier to get through.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Now, SmackDown, I really enjoyed SmackDown, but I felt like SmackDown had moments of WTF and they had moments of absolute greatness.
Yes.
And what I mean by that, the entire show I thought was pretty good. Like if I had to give it a rating on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say it's probably a 7.5, maybe an 8. And I feel like it was really saved by what I'm deeming as the greatness on it. I thought it was really, really good. The WTF moment for me was you've got Maximum Male Models in the ring, and this is a group that has already struggled to get over. I think it was a bad concept by Vince, and I think Triple H is trying to figure his way out of it. But you have these guys in the ring. They're cutting a promo, and next thing, and we both know that the leader of Maximum Male Models can cut an absolute great promo. So he's in the ring cutting a promo, and next thing you know, Hit Row's music hits, and Hit Row takes its time getting to the ring. They finally get in the ring, and they do some moves, and they basically toss out Maximum Male Models. And then next thing you know, they start rapping. And I'm going to be honest with you, I wish we were together, because you should have seen my face. I was sitting there, and I was just like, I had like my eyebrows squinched down, and I had my mouth open like, what the fuck are we doing here? What is this? And
you know what? That's a segment that's being produced by the intern. You know, you're like, oh man, you can, because what you're saying, and it's so true, is with the improved product, most segments have been hitting. Like 95% of segments are like, okay, it makes sense. It tells a purpose. We have a match. We have a promo. Good. There have been very few moments like we got with that, where you're like, wait a minute, did they just give this segment to like a first timer and said, hey kid, just run with it, put some shit together, and that's what we got? It did not seem like a well thought out segment, which you're surprised, because you have all, and you know it's funny because we talked about incompetence before we started recording. You have all these meetings. When that segment comes out, did anybody go, what the fuck? This doesn't make any sense. Let's cut this. And I think sometimes maybe they're not willing to cut shit out that might not make sense in advance. Because, yeah, that came off as really – I wrote my notes down as cut this shit out. That was my note. Cut that shit out. That shit should have been never aired on television.
It just didn't fit anything. It didn't help. It didn't help elevate Hit Row. It didn't help move their storyline forward. Like, you want them to come out and rap, and it wasn't even a good rap.
Right.
The whole building fills with smoke and fog, and you're just like, what is going on here? Honestly, I really wish I should have just took a picture of my face and just tweeted it out, because I was like, what is this? It didn't make any sense.
Do you think at all maybe just a little response to the Acclaim's popularity rapping on television, just to see if they could get a little cheap pop?
It might be. That's a good call. I didn't even think about that. That's a really good call. But look at the way the Acclaim does it, right?
Cheap
they do
pop,
it on their way to the ring.
Yeah.
And it's legitimately, it is like a verse. It is a verse on their way to the ring. There is no, we're going to stand in the middle of the ring, we're going to hang over the ropes, we're going to rap to you for 5 minutes. None of that. None of that.
Yeah.
It's just Max Caster with a couple of one-liners, and then you give it to Anthony Bowens, and he's like, Cleveland! It's here! And then they scissor. And the scissoring part is the best part.
All right, do better. So WWE do better with Hit Row.
I just didn't know what it was, man. It left me confused. Now, some of the greatness on the show. We got to see Roman Reigns, and we know Roman Reigns is at the top of his game. Absolutely incredible. Drew McIntyre, absolutely fantastic. They had this storyline getting weaved throughout the show between Roman Reigns and Sami Zayn. I thought it was absolutely great. Thought what they pulled off at the very end of the show was outstanding. Roman comes down to the ring, starts cutting a promo. Drew ends up interrupting. Of course, there's a little tussling. Of course, they're going to get into it a little bit. I thought their promos back and forth to each other were absolutely fantastic and got you into what is coming up at Cardiff. Next thing you know, Drew gets Roman in the corner, goes to hit a Claymore. Sami Zayn comes out of nowhere, pushes Roman to safety, and eats another Claymore. He ended up saving Jay last week. This week he saves Roman. Next thing you know, Roman's loading up for the Superman punch, and in the end, Roman ends up connecting, or Drew ends up connecting with Roman with a Claymore, and then we fade to black. I thought the way they did this was absolutely fantastic. One, it ties more of that Sami Zayn, because I had no idea where the Sami Zayn bloodline story was going. It helped weave it into the story. He got to sit down with Roman. They got to have a conversation. You could tell Roman was manipulating him, but Sami's all for it. And then you have Sami Zayn making the save, which I think is incredibly important. Also, Roman at a certain point looks at him like, this guy just saved me. This guy just helped me out. It's important, guys. Those things are important. And I thought that was absolutely fantastic, the way they did it, the way they showed it. And I thought the back and forth between Drew and Roman, Drew can carry his own. Drew is a franchise player. I thought the way these two guys went back and forth was absolutely fantastic. What did you make of that final segment on SmackDown?
Absolutely. And then you're starting to also think, too, my note here on SmackDown was, man, WWE has to make many more returns to Montreal, because the fans there are great. They love the action. The pop that Sami had for his own match was
so good.
Spectacular. It was so good. And I'm just like, Montreal has a lot of great memories, because the night after WrestleMania 18, they went to Montreal and they cheered the hell out of Hulk Hogan and created a viral moment when they just wouldn't stop cheering for a good 9 minutes with Hulk Hogan in the ring. They're just a crazy wrestling crowd, and it just shows when they're into the match, chanting into it all. And then the great part of having Sami Zayn, too, is that you also have Kevin Owens now in the mix, too. So even though we've joked around at the 10,000 matches they had, there's an interesting way to weave everybody in regards to Roman Reigns. But I thought that at least Roman being alone for a moment was nice to see the action between Roman and Drew McIntyre. So the job is to build intrigue in the match. I don't think I needed it, because I'm interested in it. So stare downs and meet offs and chatting is not something I'm really the most fond of. I'm more in line with doing stuff backstage, potentially Roman Reigns costing Drew McIntyre, have Roman Reigns come out on Monday Night Raw and cost Drew McIntyre the match, get into his head psychologically. But the talking's fine in the ring and all that, because it's going to lead to physicality. So while it's predictable, it was done in a great creative way. And Drew McIntyre deserves to have a program with Roman Reigns, and it's going to be good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be fantastic. These are two guys who can really carry their own.
Yes.
Thought they were great. Anything else that captured your eye on SmackDown? Anything else that you liked on SmackDown? Because we've got a ton to get into with AEW.
I'm just continuing to watch some of the pushes. Gunther. I want to see Ricochet continue to do his thing. I want to see the women in the tag teams. Obviously, with the injury news that happened, the women's tag team tournament caught my eye. Obviously, having Shawn Michaels and his new role explaining what had happened. I thought that the young tag team got the win. Advancing was pretty cool. And
I thought that was interesting as well because
yes.
I think Zoe Starks is going to be an absolute superstar. Yes. I think she's physically she has a look about her that is interesting. She is physically she's great in the ring. The injury comes at a bad time and knocks them out of that tournament. But I thought that the way I read it, they were supposed to go over in that match if they did wrestle it. So interesting.
Yes, and now I'm intrigued by what's going on with the tag team tournament, and I thought SmackDown really delivered in the time that they had.
Yeah, I thought it was a good show. I thought it was a really, really good show. Like I said, just a little bit of things that kind of had me scratching my head. Now, AEW, we had a monster return. We're going to get to that a little bit later on in this segment, but there is a shitstorm of brewing with one CM Punk. So we've got a bit to talk about here. I guess let's just kind of start it off this way. Thought we got a great promo on Wednesday night between CM Punk and Jon Moxley to open up Dynamite. Now, as the show went on, we find out that we are going to get CM Punk, Jon Moxley to unify the titles next week on Dynamite instead of at All Out, which is in a few weeks. I think it's like 14 days away, 15 days away. So not very far away. Do you think it's a mistake to be giving this away for free? Because I feel like Jon Moxley at this moment in time is absolutely great. On top of that, the crowd is super into him. CM Punk, it really appears like he could do no wrong and the crowd's going to always be into him. This is basically $1 million ticket. This is a prize fight that you have on your hands, yet you're going to give it away on free TV. I was scratching my head when I found out that they're giving this away next week on free TV. What did you make of them doing this, and is it a massive mistake? Should they save this for All Out? Because this is a match I feel like everybody would pay to watch.
Yeah, it's an interesting decision that they make. You got to build up TV ratings. You're building up interest. You know, you have two performers that were obviously chirping at each other, have different agendas. So, look, anytime, All Out has been a staple, so I feel like AEW doesn't need to, put all the best matches on it because everybody loves it. It's a wrestling crowd, so they eat up everything anyway. I want to see it. So, in an ADD world, I love the feud, and I love the way that my notes were. I love that CM Punk is taking kind of this I'm the money guy approach, and Moxley is I'm the worker approach, which has been the classic feud in wrestling now forever, where you got the likes of Hulk Hogan and Brock Lesnar and the performers per se versus the wrestlers like Seth Rollins, Jon Moxley. And it's an age-old debate. Now, the manner in which this one went, I thought the line was delivered great when Moxley said, hey, you haven't been carrying shit in this company, it's been me. And then CM Punk quickly comes back with, fine, you can be the wrestler, I'll be the dollars and cents of this company. And it was I just thought a beautiful psychology of the story that they're telling, because CM Punk, in my mind, is the dollars and cents, but has the potential to be the worker as well. But I think the injury derailed it. So I think it's interesting that he's chosen to take this, because I would have just said, you think you're a worker? I'm the best in the world. Let me show you what a real worker is. But I think that CM Punk taking the stance of, hey, I'm the guy that draws money is a little bit more of an insult to, I think that's the biggest insult that you can give a guy in the ring, which is, hey, you're a wrestler, you do what I do, but people pay to see my ass, and you're beating your body up. And I'm probably going to make 4 times as much as you. So that's where the resentment comes in the back, maybe starting this process of where you're going with some of the notes that you have. But I think that's the biggest insult you can tell another wrestler is, I'm the money draw, you're a worker, because you're putting your body on the line. And you would think that a wrestler would want people to appreciate that. But bottom line, CM Punk is the draw. He gets the loudest ovation. I was bummed out that he wasn't in Detroit. and I'm very fascinated to see this match whenever it takes place.
Now, just to remind everybody, CM Punk hasn't really had a title reign. He hasn't even had a title defense. He won the belt, and then on the very next Wednesday ends up breaking his foot, and he's been shelved for, almost 8 weeks now. I thought
also pay attention to the beginning intro. When he walks out, he goes to jump in the ring, and he's like, oh, I probably shouldn't do that. And then he goes to jump in the crowd. I thought that was a little subtle reminder of, oh shit, I probably shouldn't be jumping.
I don't think he's 100% healthy. Yeah. I really don't. So again, it leads to a lot of speculation, a lot of intrigue as to what they've got planned for All Out. It'll be interesting to kind of see what happens. And before we close the segment, we'll talk a little bit about that. But before we get Jon Moxley and we get CM Punk and they have their dust up, CM Punk sits down in the middle of the ring, pipe bomb style, and calls out Adam Hangman Page. Report is he went into business for himself. This was unscripted. Hangman was somewhere else in the back, not in like the go position or gorilla, whatever you want to call it, was not in position to head out to the ring to address this. Basically, CM Punk sits in the middle of the ring, calls out Adam Hangman Page, and says, everybody's chanting cowboy shit, and in the end he says, oh, it looks like it's a bunch of coward shit, and then he goes into cutting this promo on Jon Moxley. This had everybody in the back furious. Everybody was pissed off because puts Hangman Page in a bad spot. Now remember, Hangman Page is a babyface. You're going to call out a babyface? Like it's just bad business because you totally devalue everything Hangman Page has done. And you can't do that. You can't allow the babyface just to get called out like that. It ends a lot of his character. Also, CM Punk, for the most part, works as a babyface. So it's just weird. It's absolutely weird. I want to know kind of what you thought about him going into business for himself. I'll give you a little bit of backstory, and then I'm going to really explain it. I'm going to explain everything with our next topic related to this. But Punk is still pissed off about a couple of things that Hangman Page said when they had their feud. Hangman Page basically said that he needs to win this belt. He needs to protect this belt from guys like CM Punk, guys who are friendly. They have a friendly face, but they're kind of a locker room cancer. And he needs to protect this locker room from a guy like CM Punk. That pissed CM Punk off. And basically CM Punk looked at this as him giving Hangman Page his receipt. Was you did this to me, I'm going to do this to you. What did you make of Punk going into business for himself and calling Page out?
Look, if you're CM Punk, why not do it? I mean, if someone's talking shit about you, and you know,
it's bad business.
No, it's not bad business because bottom line, when the time comes and maybe Adam Hangman Page has another feud with Punk, I think Punk does not have creative control. I think he'll do what's best for business. And what you do is first off, you have to also look at this. CM Punk is in the business of elevating CM Punk. Now, with an elevated CM Punk, that also means that if and when the time comes and he lays on the mat for the 1, 2, 3, if he does it for Adam Page, it means more. So in the end, controversy equals cash. And I think if there's a long-term play, if they ask him about it and he says, hey, why'd you do that? He's like, that's my receipt for the bullshit that he said about me. He devalued my brand, so I gave him a little receipt. And in the end, bottom line, settle it in the ring, make the dollars and make the cents. Do I care? Look, for those that look hardly at the position and say, oh, Adam Hangman Page has been devalued. No, he hasn't. The guy can go in the ring and he can have a couple wins and he's right back in the mix. The guy can wrestle. He's got the package. He's over. So what you're doing in my mind is planting a seed for another match down the road when these two lock up, and I'm further interested. See, I don't get into all that. Like, I look at devaluing in the ring how you take a loss. You know, who wins the storyline? Who ends up getting over in matches? If someone comes out and they're not supposed to rip me and they end up ripping me, it's wrestling. I mean, Shawn Michaels basically came on the air and told Bret Hart he was sleeping with another lady. So, I mean, come on. I think what you and I like is the realism. So if he goes into business for himself, so be it. Because I think CM Punk, bottom line, still has the appearance to me that he'll do best for business. And he knows because of what he came through in WWE. I don't think he's going to be rogue and all pissed off and cry and take his ball and go home. I think he said, okay, I've been away, so I need to elevate myself. How do I do that? By getting over on the guy that has been talking shit to me. I elevate myself. So I have no problem with it whatsoever because of the fact that, hey, when the tickets go on sale, a lot of them are being bought for CM Punk. It's kind of like, how do you handle someone who's not going to get fired? You got to deal with it. So as long as he stays healthy and has good matches in the ones that he is in, he can do and say whatever he wants in the ring. That's the whole nature of, if you're going to have unscripted promos, there's going to be times where dudes are going to be willing with those egos to say some crazy shit, but it makes it fun.
Interesting you said, take his ball and go home. So this is a reoccurring theme with CM Punk. When he gets frustrated, he does take his ball. He does go home. You've seen it in WWE. Now, we understand that there were other mitigating factors in his reason to leave WWE and the way he left WWE. Now, there are reports that AEW feared that CM Punk was going to quit the company over frustrations, essentially taking his ball and going home. So perfect segue. Thank you for the setup. I do appreciate that. Now, what has happened, this goes back to the whole thing with Hangman Page. In their build for that title shot, CM Punk was adamant that he would not lose to Hangman Page, which I find really weird. You come into a company and you say that you're here to help get guys over, yet you refuse to help build up the current champion. So you refuse to lose to Hangman Page. You have beef with the way Hangman Page helped set up and build up your match. And to give you a little bit more insight where that set up and where that came from. I think it was a few weeks ago we talked about how Colt Cabana hasn't been seen on Dynamite, or at least hasn't been seen on Dynamite or Rampage when CM Punk is there. Well, that was because Tony Khan was going to let Colt Cabana's contract expire. And what ended up happening was the locker room was incredibly pissed off about this because Colt Cabana is loved in that locker room. Everybody went to Tony Khan and was like, you can't do that. Like, how are you going to do this? You're going to do this for this brand new guy that you just brought in? He's been here since basically day one, and you're going to do this to him? So they ended up switching Colt Cabana over to ROH. They keep him and Punk separated. Now, we documented this. We've talked about this. That was where that line from Hangman Page came from, about him having a friendly face but being a locker room cancer. Basically, he divided that locker room with that move that he did with Colt Cabana, and a lot of guys are pissed about it. Just like they're pissed about what CM Punk did to Hangman Page this past week on Dynamite. Now, through all of this, Punk has garnered some heat in the background, had some frustration with that build with Hangman Page. Obviously, he hasn't really wrestled since. What do you think about those reports coming out and all those things basically being unveiled now? Like how this match with Hangman Page was such a point of consternation for CM Punk, and how it almost drove him to quit the company, and the fact that he refused to lose. I just don't think CM Punk's a team player. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I like CM Punk. When we were younger, loved CM Punk. The more and more I know about CM Punk, he seems like he's just a piece of shit. He seems like he's an egomaniac.
But see, that's weird because how does he act like that knowing that's what pissed him off in WWE? I feel like you're getting caught up in a shoot situation, but it's a work, bro. It's not. I think that you're getting these reports from those that are getting these reports.
There are multiple reports about this, though.
But at the same time, I'm also in the business of also thinking, why would a company let these reports come out? So I'm thinking that AEW and WWE are notorious for just telling these reporters a bunch of bullshit like, oh, Brock Lesnar left. Remember when Brock Lesnar left the Smackdown show and then all of a sudden he shows up? Now, it just has a feel to me of a wrestling company that wants this narrative out there to potentially draw and make CM Punk much more of a hated figure, maybe in a way to build his respect. In my mind,
make him go heel?
Yeah, almost in a way that you say to yourself, wait a minute, why is this narrative coming to fruition? So in my mind, I'm okay with it. I want to see how it plays out. I think it's being told to people, but I'm not so sure that it's not, I don't think it's a shoot. I think it's a work. Everybody's getting worked out here.
All right. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Now, again, it raises some questions for what's going to take place with All Out. How do you see All Out playing out? I do want to kind of double back and wrap this up this way. We've got All Out coming up in a couple of weeks. This Jon Moxley CM Punk was the money match. That was the match that was supposed to headline it. We're getting it early. What do you think happens? There's been a lot of speculation that possibly MJF makes a return. Do you see that? Does CM Punk end up winning this? Do we have one of those weird finishes where no title is changed and they just go to All Out? Like, how do you see this playing out?
That's a good question, man. I'm not sure how
it can go in a lot of directions.
It can go in a lot of directions. I still think they have the match in and of itself, in that you still can have the match at All Out. Maybe you have some kind of finish that's really crazy, or something happens that really makes the feud more intriguing. But yeah, that is really, really tough to be able to determine what's the best for business too. So I think this one I'm just going to punt and say, let's all sit back and enjoy it and see what happens this Wednesday. And I think they've done a good job of building that intrigue for all of us to say, hey, let's have a good match. And I guess I got to ask you, bottom line, I think in this case you got to choose that when all the dust clears, no matter how many matches you have, I think CM Punk's got to have his title reign.
You know, I don't think you're wrong there. And it's weird because I think Jon Moxley has done a fantastic job carrying this company, and I think he has helped build this belt and helped add some prestige to it. And I will be incredibly sad to see Jon Moxley lose his title. But I do think they leave it on CM Punk. And if you do leave it on CM Punk, I think now is the perfect time to bring MJF back. MJF has almost been forgotten about. Now is the perfect time to bring him back. You bring him back, the roof of the building will explode and pop. So it'll be crazy interesting.
Yeah, but best for business would be Jon Moxley to be the one to take it off of him in a year or so, or 6 months or 8 months, or whenever the decision is made. Jon Moxley can have some great more feuds, can bleed all over the place for another year, and then it should then go to Jon Moxley. CM Punk should return the favor.
All right, before we get to show of the week, Kenny Omega makes his triumphant return. Kenny Omega does not look like he's 100%, and I think that's part of the reason why he's in a trios match. What did you make of his return on Wednesday? I thought it was great. I thought the way that they built it up was really, really nice. I think we all knew it, but you didn't know until you knew, and then once you knew, it was pretty great.
It was pretty great, man. 8 months goes by pretty fast. He was missed, and it was great to see those suplexes. It was amazing. It was good. The crowd reaction was just on point. And I can't get over the fact that they acknowledged all those acknowledgments, and they say he was the Sports Illustrated Wrestler of the Year. Like it was just funny to me, because acknowledging publications calling you Wrestler of the Year, you know, it's not exactly always on merit. You know, you put a guy on there potentially to sell magazines. So the Sports Illustrated Wrestler of the Year, Kenny Omega, it just made me laugh that they would put that in an intro, but it was great. His entrance was great. It's good to see him, and hopefully he is healthy so that we can get some more great memories. I do want to just quickly highlight the biggest event from Impact. It was a good show because they're setting up for Bound for Glory. The main event was the highlight. You had a 6-way elimination #1 contenders match with Eddie Edwards, Steve Maclin, Moose, Sami Callihan, Bandito, and Rich Swann. And the World Championship right now is being held by Josh Alexander. They're on the road for Bound for Glory. And this was a match. If you don't really partake in Impact too much, just find the 6-way elimination match. And in the end, it's going to be Josh Alexander at Bound for Glory, the World Champion. Josh Alexander is going to take on Eddie Edwards. And it was the right call. It was a great match. It was violent. It had everything that you would want. And it was a very good main event. A lot of great near falls, great moments. And Swann, Edwards, everybody, really, Rich Swann and Eddie Edwards put on, it was like they've been wrestling each other for years. So I thought that it was a great way to keep elevating Honor No More, entering one of the big pay-per-views. So check out, it was a B+ show, real good. Not good enough to be show of the week. I thought the show of the week was SmackDown for me.
Oh, really?
I did. I think the crowd at Montreal, Sami Zayn, the main event feud. Now, of course, I think that Dynamite is a close second, but in terms of elevated and new characters, you got to remember, the AEW has the best, probably high-end situations at the main event and the mid-card, but the opening stuff and things that they can do in the first hour could leave a lot for desire. And to be honest, if you have a show with Jade Cargill on it, you get a demerit.
Yeah. I totally understand that. I get that. That was probably one of the weakest segments on the show, but I thought Dynamite was the winner this week. I thought we opened with a great promo.
Yes.
I thought we had a really nice pull apart. We got a little bit of a surprise with them giving us a massive match next week. And then you end up wrapping up the show with a fantastic main event and a great return. I felt like the end of that match was a little bit rushed, but I thought all in all, Dynamite was the better show. Only by a slim margin, though. Only by a slim margin. Again, WWE doing really, really good stuff. How about some news and notes?
I can't wait. Hit me with this week's professional wrestling news and notes. What made your list?
All right, file this under out of touch and ridiculous. Per WrestleVotes, if Vince McMahon was still in power, Gunther, a.k.a. Walter's WWE trajectory would be very different. Well, WrestleVotes noted that those in power soured on Gunther following his appearance on the July 4th Monday Night Raw episode to the point where a burial on TV was planned. Gunther's entire run has been as part of the Smackdown brand, with a one-off appearance on Raw back on July 4th, where he defeated R-Truth, who was dressed up as Uncle Sam. Currently, Gunther is your Intercontinental Champ, and I think we all agree. Gunther/Walter is fantastic in the ring. Vince McMahon's just a crazy man. A major WWE star is working through an injury. PW Insider has confirmed that Drew McIntyre has been dealing with an ongoing back injury he's working through. He referenced that a little bit this week. Fightful provided an update on the report, noting that surgery will not be required, and McIntyre is set to challenge Roman Reigns at Clash of the Castle, which will be next month in Cardiff. McIntyre has been pulled from a few house shows due to this, so if you are watching the WWE live events, if he was on the card, he may not, so you might want to double check that. Now, it sounds like one of the most creative minds in WWE did not see eye to eye with the head of creative. Everyone was shocked when Bray Wyatt was released from WWE. Some reports explain that what soured and the likelihood of the return of the Fiend, what might end up taking place here going forward. In recent reports, Fightful Select noted Vince McMahon's relationship with Wyatt was documented and how it was done with him, as he would yell derogatory things about his physique to him. And naturally, the report ended with Fightful noting that it would be more likely for Wyatt to make a return to WWE now that McMahon is gone. Wade Keller of PW Torch backed up this report, even taking it one step further, noting that Wyatt would be likely back in the company soon. Sounds like Vince McMahon and Bray Wyatt would get in a room. Vince would cut him down about the way he looked, and Bray would bring all these creative ideas, and then Vince would shit on them, and Vince would throw some creative ideas back at Bray, and Bray would be like, that's garbage, what are we doing? And it just sounded like it was a very contentious relationship. More AEW and New Japan crossovers are being planned. Per Dave Meltzer on Wrestling Observer Radio, there are plans for some AEW wrestlers to compete at the January 2023 Wrestle Kingdom event. Per Meltzer, I don't know how many, but I have in fact been told of certain plans for AEW wrestlers on Wrestle Kingdom. They are planned for certain AEW guys to be at the Tokyo Dome show, yes. Now, Rhodes is wrestling again, and this time at the Performance Center. PW Insider is reporting that Brandy Rhodes, not Cody, is wrestling or wrestled a match at an in-house live event at the WWE Performance Center. Her in-ring return was last week, Friday on August 12th. WWE will regularly hold these kind of shows for NXT talent to give them some more chances to perform and improve beyond only wrestling on TV once a week and the occasional weekend house show in Florida. The report did not mention who Rhodes wrestled on Friday, but did note that she is not currently listed as a member of the NXT roster. Prior to this, Rhodes' last official match was January 26th on AEW Dark Elevation, taping against Kylan King. Kylan King recently wrestled against Toni Storm on this past week's Rampage or Dynamite. I don't know, my days are running together. I think it was Dynamite. WWE has announced a shift with NXT UK, which will now transition to NXT Europe. Recently, WWE canceled the NXT UK tapings at the studio as the studio that was used was booked. It seemed to be the push for the merging of this off-continent WWE brand with a more worldwide approach. with this transition to NXT Europe and phasing out NXT UK, WWE has already released over 20 NXT UK superstars. So a ton of talent back on the job market. Don't be surprised if those guys start showing up in either AEW or Impact or back on the indie scene, especially in Great Britain. Now, there is a lot of heat in AEW. This kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier. It's kind of just a rehashing of the stuff going on with CM Punk. Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer described this as a much bigger issue. He wrote that there is a ton of backstage drama involving many of the top guys that have gotten much worse in recent weeks. Meltzer even suggested Tony Khan might need to sit everyone down soon to air everything out before it gets any worse. The big thing that was said to have set all of this situation off was with Colt Cabana. Given the history between Punk and Cabana ended up disappearing from AEW and was going to be cut before people jumped in, and Khan kept him for ROH instead. Meltzer added, it feels like a number of people are close to the breaking point if things don't get settled. So tons and tons of drama in AEW. And that's going to do it for this week's Wrestling News and Notes.
Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. If you agreed or disagreed with anything that you've heard, hit us up. Message us at Detroit Podcast. Let us know what you think. Thanks to everybody who subscribed every single day and listened, downloaded, interacted. We greatly appreciate it. Next week will be another big episode, a big week of professional wrestling ahead with AEW, Impact, what's going on with Triple H, and the new Executive Vice President, Shawn Michaels. I thought that was a great decision by Triple H to elevate really one of the premier talents in the world of professional wrestling. And boy, now you got to look at it. DX is running WWE. Maybe there's going to be a little bit more risque stuff. And I also, we didn't highlight it with our last 60 seconds. I also really liked the reason why Smackdown I thought was a show of the week. The Killian Cross promo was real.
It was absolutely
to tie it back to the beginning of the show. It was real. It was passionate, and it was so delivered in a way that makes you go, wow, fuck yeah, Killian Cross. Let's see this version of him. He said, basically, in a nutshell, the WWE picked you, Drew, and it was wrong. Go check it out on the WWE socials. Thanks, everybody. This episode comes to a close. Podcasting time is now over. See everybody next week on the latest edition of the Doc and Jock Wrestling Podcast.